Hi, I'm Julia and this is my shed. I had a lot of comments on my last video about fitting the boiler to the smoke box and how how much trouble I was having, and I had quite a few people saying in the nicest possible way that I'd got it all wrong and the smoke box here needs to be higher up, and then the boiler will fit perfectly. And I even had one chap give me some dimensions of what the height of the top of the chimney should be, so effectively what the loading gauge should be for 5-inch gauge locos. And I really appreciate the comments. You know, sometimes you're working on your own and you sort of go down one path and you don't think about all the other possibilities, and it can you know, sometimes you do need to sort of take a step back and, you know, make sure you are on the right track. And so I do really appreciate the comments, and you know, it's useful for me, and it does help the channel as well. You know, the more comments I get, the more likely the algorithm, you know, the infamous algorithm, will serve up my video to people that like similar stuff to the people that make comments. You know, that's how it works. So you know, please keep the comments coming. I do really appreciate it. And you know, I've spent my life in engineering, and although you do need to be very focused as an engineer, quite often you're more productive and more effective if you work in a team, because, you know, different people will have different ideas, and sometimes people will think of something that you haven't. And you know, sometimes, you know, it's worth listening to those opinions, even if just to, you know, disregard them, you know, and confirm you're on the right path. So anyway, a few people have said the smoke box should be too high up. It should be higher up. So I had an idea this morning. I was going to measure everything, but what I've done actually is just get the steam pipes fitted, one either side. That you can see that this is the inside one, and there's holes in the smoke box for those to go through. Now the smoke box is not attached except via these pipes at the moment, so I've tightened up the nuts finger tight. So hopefully you can see the smoke box does not move at all. It is in the correct place. There is literally no other way for it to go. It will not move up or down or side to side at all with these pipes in place. That's my own fault. I should have actually tried fitting these before, but basically it will not fit in any other position. So yeah, I can't even tilt it actually, which is one thing I was hoping to do. So basically the position of this smoke box is fixed. Okay, so we've ascertained we cannot move this. So I mean, one of the things in engineering generally I've learnt over the years is that if you can sort of reduce the number of variables, it always makes problem solving a bit easier. So I can't move this. I'll just bring you down to the boiler. So this boiler, it is of a decent standard. You know, it's a typical good boiler made by somebody that's probably only going to make 1 or 2 boilers in their life. So it's quite a typical, made by a model engineer boiler. You know, it passes its hydraulic test no problem at all. Some of the joints are a bit scruffy, but you know, overall it does the job. So I'm not going to change the boiler. So again, that's another thing we can't change. So you know, what are our options? Well, the only options that we've got is to modify the chassis and the position that the boiler sits in the chassis. So although I was a bit disheartened, I think really we are definitely on the right track. So hope Hope that's not too much waffle. But now this is really fixed in place. I will put the bolts. There's a couple of bolts fore and aft holding it to the saddle, so I'll put those in, and then we'll put the boiler back in and just see, what else we can do, if there is anything that's possible. I say I don't think I can drop the ash pan down much further. I mean, we've got a tiny bit of clearance here, but we've already lost the ability to use the to put the dampers in, because I'm not sure if you can see, but the cross axle for the dampers would go through this part of the trailing truck. So there's, I don't know, there's not much clearance there now. If you can see, that's the bottom of the ash pan. Maybe a mil or two. That's where we are really. I can take more out of this stretcher. That's possible. So we've already taken quite a lot out of the frame, but I don't think we're going to be able to get it much lower. So I'll put the boiler on, and we'll have a quick look. But anyway, that's sort of an update of where we are. Okay, so this is the situation on both sides. I've basically measured this gap, and I've made that gap level at this height to be about 11.5 on both. As you can see, the gap gets smaller at the top, so that would suggest the back of the boiler is too high, but I haven't really got any wiggle room there. So I've got, as far as I can tell, the boiler barrel at the front is central. Yeah. However, if we now look at the back of the boiler, hopefully you can see that we're quite far towards this side. Should be fairly obvious. You can see we've got more of an overhang on this side. So this is the centre of the rear, and this is the centre of the chassis. So really these two should match up. I think basically this section of the boiler isn't really that square with the barrel. So yeah, this would just look horrendous if we did this. So what I'm going to do is make it so that we're central at the back, and just really we have to find a way of covering up any mismatch at the front. So I think, yeah, we've got the option. We've got to put cleading, which will go up to, I'm not sure if you can see that, there's a bit of a ridge here, so the cleading will come up to there. So we should be, as long as there's no air leaking around this seam, and I usually use high temperature silicone to seal that joint anyway, which has got a bit of give and will fill gaps. I think I need to stop worrying about this front seal. It is what it is, and then just concentrate on getting the rear of the boiler as central as possible. This sort of, I'm not sure if you can see that, but this strip that's around the boiler is a bit too big, so I need to remove some of that so that we're at the same diameter as this section. So I'll try and take this off actually, because it's not going to help. Yeah, I think so. I was a bit disheartened, I must admit. This week has been quite tough. I've had lots on anyway, so it's all been a bit distracting. But I think really we just have to make the best of a bad job. Yeah, the idea with this is that it's a working loco. It's not going to be a show winner. That's not really what I'm into. I'm not, I like locos to look good, but I want them to work as best as they can. So yeah, sorry about all the waffle, but I did have a lot of comments, so I thought I'd try and address all those at the start of this video. So it's not as bad as it seems. Yeah, okay, let's go and do something more interesting. So here's a bit of footage of the final assembly of the ash pan, and what I'll be doing is welding it up. So I'm just sort of getting it trial fitted together. The reason why I'm doing welding is that the ash pan's held together with nuts and bolts, and it's quite difficult to get to them with the grate in place. So rather than sort of fiddle around for hours trying to get those in position, I'm just going to push the bolts through to sort of locate everything, and then use welds to actually sort of hold it all together properly. So I'm using my TIG welder to do this. It's a bit better for stainless really, because I've got some stainless filler rod that I can use later on. Got quite a low current, sort of 20-25 amps, and even then I am actually getting the odd blow through. I wouldn't claim to be an experienced welder by any stretch of the imagination, and it's always a bit of a learning curve with TIG because I don't do it often enough. But yeah, feel free to critique my TIG welding methods. I did find, as you can see, actually, I found it quite difficult to sort of clamp this together. It's quite an awkward shape, and actually finding sort of flat parts that I can use a clamp on was quite difficult. But we sort of got it assembled eventually, and then I could carry on sort of stitching round with the TIG. And obviously once you get a few tack welds in, it all starts to get a bit easier once it's all in effectively one piece. And then you can sort of carry on filling in. So you can see I'm sort of tacking and then tapping with the hammer, which is a sort of classic panel beater sort of trick where, you know, once the tacks sort of hold the two pieces together, you can then close up the gap between them with the hammer and then sort of add more weld. So that works quite effectively. So I was using that technique quite a lot. But yeah, there we go. So you can see I'm using the filler rod now. That can be quite helpful when you're welding thin sheet, because once you've got the weld pool going, you can sort of cool the weld down by just dipping the filler rod in, and that can help with blowing through. I think later on I use a technique where I actually lay the filler rod onto the join and effectively melt that onto the base metal. Again, that can help with blowing through, but it is quite fiddly. It's quite very thin steel or stainless. So there's some two U sections in the ash pan, which I'm just welding up now. They basically protect the frame and keep the ashes sort of falling either side of the frame members. So again, I'm just tacking these in place. They don't need to be particularly strong because they effectively rest on top of the frame. Okay, so I went a bit mad with the TIG welding. I'm a devil for that. All I needed to do was to tack weld this, and I've then ended up trying to seam weld it, so I've blown through in a couple of places. It's quite thin. I mean, it is stainless, but it is quite thin, so you have to be quite careful. So I'll grind this back and see if we can make it look presentable. If not, I'll need to get the grinder out again. So the other side's not too bad, but I've got a few too many holes here. So I think I'll get the welder out and just try and fill some of these in a little bit. Just to tidy it up a little bit, really. Should be okay on the vertical, but it is quite, the ash pan's quite visible on the Britannia, so we'll try and clean that up a little bit, just to get rid of some of the holes. I mean, that's okay, but these are quite, because you've got such a line of them there, it looks quite noticeable. But we've got quite a thick blob of weld there and there, so hopefully we can join those up. So we'll give that a go in a minute. You can see that. Quite difficult to get the lighting right. But, yeah, it'll all look nice once it's all painted anyway. Classic welding excuse. So I was really struggling with these last few holes. I think at some point I'd accidentally turned the gas off, which wasn't really helping. So it all got a bit blobby and pigeon poo, as welders say. But well, the grinder got rid of the worst of it, and it's not too bad in the end. Okay, so I've given that a bit of a clean up, and we're giving it a dose of the old stove black paint. I haven't used any etch primer this time, because obviously the ash pan might get quite hot, certainly the top part of it, so we'll just go with just the plain stove paint for now, and we'll see how we get on with that. So I'll probably need to have another coat on that. It's not covered very well, unfortunately, but we'll let that coat dry, and then I'll put another coat on it, and I'm sure it'll be fine. Okay, bring you back in a minute. So I'm fairly happy now with where the boiler is. As you can see, I made quite a mess when I was working on the frame, so I'm just going to get the Dremel tool with a sanding drum on it now, just to sort of clean up. You know, I've got quite a lot of not very even there and quite a bit of dangly bits, so we'll just try and clean that up, ready for paint. Okay, so this is all nicely deburred now, so that's ready for paint. So what I'll do is I'll get a little bit of etch primer sprayed into the spray can cap, and I'll just use a small paintbrush just to get some etch primer on these parts. This stretches aluminium, so paint doesn't stick particularly well to aluminium, so we will need an etch primer for that. And this stretcher is brass down here, so that will need etch priming as well. So may as well do all of it. Obviously I don't want to spray, because I don't want overspray on all the black painted parts. You can obviously touch up the black paint afterwards, but yeah, so all good. Just found another burr, so I'll get rid of that, and we'll get painting. Oh, that's a tough one. There we go. Okay, that's the ash pan painted, ready to go back on the loco. And I've touched up the paint on the loco as well. Still a bit wet at the moment, that's why it doesn't look matte. And there was a few scratches where the way shaft goes in, so I've done those as well. So I'll pop the boiler back on in a second once the paint's dry, but I think we'll call it a day there. I think that's as good as we're going to get, and we'll be able to get on to doing the way shaft next week, so at least we know what we're doing now. So I'll bring you back once the boiler's in place. So this line shows where the smoke box will be. So as you can see, as we go round, it will be further in on this side than on the other side. But as I say, there's enough overlap here. Yeah, that was the bit I was most concerned about, but there's still enough overlap there. A bit of silicone will seal that join up, no problem at all. And we'll cover this slight mismatch with the cleading. So I've got to make new cleading for this, so not an issue. I'll pop this on and we can see what it looks like. So that's the ash pan and the boiler in its final position. Got a reasonable close fit to the boiler there, so that's all pretty good. We're clear of the frames, so I think that will do. So I hope you found that interesting. Like, share and subscribe, and please leave a comment, always interested, and I will see you in the next one. where we will finally tackle the way shaft problem.